Okay, so this is the search page on the plant database. So this is the least amount of information that we want about plants, but of course there's much more than this that shows up on the detail pages for each plant. Families, plant type, aquatic, all the different types. I don't know if you can see the drawdowns. I think you should be able to see those as I show you these zones, growing zones 1 through 13. Those kinds of things. So there's a lot of drawdowns when you enter the information, but most of those also just come to these different things. So ecological functions that we're looking for. We can add more of those, and very rarely we do. If we come upon something that's major and doesn't fit any of these categories, we can always add another one, but then we have to go back and fix all the rest of the plants, which isn't a bad thing, that might have that same feature. But these are the ones that generally come up. And the human uses, of course. So this is the basic search page that people use to find their plants for their site. Ecological information at the top and such. What we're looking for when we do the data entry is the information that shows up really on the plant page. So of course, a lot of these things we don't search for. All the information up on the top here, characteristics, tolerances, behaviors, those are all things that are on that search page, or they're at least in the data entry page, so that's on here. You probably wouldn't search for plants by growing season, or bloom time, but you could. But it'd be very difficult then to keep track of all those different things. But they do show up in the spreadsheets of the plants, so that's why we have this in here. So basic plant information. If you see at the top here, there's a category of woody, and we have woody or herbaceous. And woody plants are measured differently than herbaceous plants, but those are the two different types of plants. And then we have categories. And then the type of plant is, like you saw, was deciduous trees, evergreen trees, perennials, things like that. So what we're trying to get to on all of our work is to fill this page out as much as possible. Now you can see here cat claw acacia has huge number of human uses and ecological functions. Great plant in so many ways. And there are even others on here. We use them for barriers to keep out goats. We plant acacia first before we put in the other plants. There's like a hedge down here because it can protect the other trees. So our outer barriers, in Senegal we're doing this, where the acacia is our barrier tree on the outer exterior of the edge, I should say, of the property to keep out the goats. And then within that are the other plants, and then finally getting into our fruit trees and such on the inside of the area. So those kinds of things are very helpful to put in here. On the notes, these are all narratives that we write based on things we've read. We don't cut and paste things. In here, we try to read as much information as possible and then just paraphrase the extent of what that information is about. But we still also want the references over here. So we cite where this information is coming from, and there's a place for that. So as you're getting information online, it's best then to keep track of where it comes from, because you're going to need that later. And it's depending on your work style, how you're going to put that in. So that's the plant database. The regular database for putting in information, hopefully this will remember who I am. Great, it remembered who I am. That's always good. Sometimes it doesn't. Oops. So this is the login site, and I'll send you the links for this and your access password and such. So the page that we're interested in here, and this, so we just left the plant database. Now we're on the data entry site. This is a totally different website, totally different layout and backbone of how it's working. So we click on maintain plants, and you can pick out plants on here. And there's a number of different things that we do to separate out plants that we're working on and those that we're not. So if I went down to scientific name and put in pinus, I would get all of the pine trees. Okay. So you can see here we have a quite extensive list of pine trees from all over the world. Bryce Ruddock did this. He's one of the other authors on integrated forest gardening. He just went through all the pine trees. Actually, you see lupins in here too, because it has pine in it, or it's lupinus. But anything that has pinus in it in the name will show up here. So we have all the pine trees in here and a few others obviously in here too. Carpinus, blue beech. So you also though see over in here anything with an exclamation point. That's how we keep plants that aren't ready to go on the plant database from showing up in the searches on the website. So as you can see, there's a lot of plants in here that they don't even have a name. All they have is a scientific name. And then you get to the maintenance page, and you can see nothing is really filled in yet. Pearl lupin, the sort name has an exclamation point in it that keeps it hidden. And then we have Lupinus mutabilis and Leguminosae. That information, but as you can see, the rest of it is blank. This is the actual page where we fill out information for each plant as somebody is working on it. So this is the last thing that happens after all the research and finding that information, is just to go through this, click on the little buttons that affect growth rate or growing season or all the different things you've found out so far in doing the research, or things you already know, and then save those changes. So this upper area with all the characteristics is kind of like a separate area. That just gets us started, and then you submit those changes. So anything that you want to do on here, you can fill these things in. Every once in a while, submit your changes. Say if I said this has medium texture, I'd submit changes. It will record that, and then it asks you, do you want to continue editing the plant? And I would say yes. And so it'll take me back to that plant again, and I can keep working. But all that information now is saved. The top fields are all the characteristics, height and spread, just like you see on the plant database. That first amount of information, tolerances, requirements, ecological requirements, or site conditions, soil type, soil texture, moisture, with that. Animal resistance, if there is any. The texture, form, notes. These are kind of the aesthetics parts. It's flower color, bloom time, seasonal interest, all year, spring, summer, fall. Keep in mind that because seasonal interest used to be by months, which was very North American centric, very biased on our part to have any kind of month of the year in here. Because as you can imagine, the same plant in South Africa or wherever else is going to have a seasonal interest in different seasons. It's going to accommodate this environment that it's in. So we've changed that all to seasons rather than any kind of month or time. Anywhere in the plant database where it refers to, like, say, April or May as being spring, it actually doesn't make any sense, especially when you're trying to adapt these globally to different people, different environments. So we go by seasons. Human uses are here. You can select a human use, and all the ones that are on the search page are here. And you can add multiple ones each time. If this is, say, a food plant, you would pick food, type in your data that you know about that plant. Initial years to harvest, that could actually be, you could have, like, if it's 6 months, 0.5 or 0.3. But initial years, because many of the trees take, 3 to 4 years to have any kind of harvest at all. Some of them take 15 to 20. So that's why we put that in here. And then the references where you got that information. And you'll see that at the bottom of each one of these is, where does this information come from? And we're not looking for a website. We're looking for an actual organization, person, name, book, something like that. Any kind of internet link just gets broken, and they're pretty worthless. Within a year, a lot of them just are broken or they're gone. So we try to put the name of the organization and where it came from. And if they have an organizational website, that might be one thing, but we just try to list actual things rather than anything from the internet. Ecological functions is the same thing. You can see all the different ones that are listed here. And those are the same that are on the search page. So you would pick out one, fill in the information that you know about it. Is the research validated? That's an interesting thing to ask. It's like, was it cited somewhere that's actually trustworthy, like a university, some research, or is it just anecdotal? Which is fine. We just want to say validated means has somebody done this? Has it been proven to be? Yes or no? And then you would put that also in these notes up here. And then again, the reference. Once you're done, you just click on add ecological function, just like you would click on add new human use. And once you've done that, you can add another. So by the time you're done, you might have 5 or 6 different human uses and 3 or 4 different ecological functions just for this one plant. And the more the better. It makes it much more useful for people. If there's a companion plant specifically for this and works well with it, and there's a lot of companion plant charts for garden plants, annuals, things like that, which is great. But if there's a specific plant that goes with this one that you might be working on, especially trees and shrubs and perennials, then you actually would go find the ID, and you can actually look up the plant in a new window, put the ID number in here. Every plant has an ID number that's in the list. And then it will know what plant you're talking about, and then you can make your notes and the reference and add the new companion plant. And the website will take care of the rest. It'll connect everything. So this is a relational database, and all we have to do is use the same, always use the same functions, pull down. The only place that we can really get creative and narrative is in the note boxes. Everything else has to be from what we have already. And that's worked well for the last couple thousand plants. Companion groups, things like that. And there's a bunch of different carrot family, grains, grasses, legumes, things like that, pepper family, squash family. If there's a certain group that this plant is in, aster family, that's great. There's some links for that. It's not something that we use a lot, but if there's some kind of literature that comes out about its being in part of a certain group, the carrot family, Queen Anne's lace is in the carrot family, lots of different things, that might be. So do that. By the way, these bottom ones aren't as important, but they do inform the page a lot, especially when we get down to concerns. Any kind of animal toxin, allergen, especially dermatitis, photodermatitis, things like that where the body is going to react to them is something that we want to have in here, and that's an allergen. Animal toxins, especially with stone fruit, things like that. Horses and animals act differently and react differently to different plants. Lilies are hugely toxic to cats. Certain plants are very toxic to dogs. It all varies quite a bit, but if there's any note about an animal toxin, this is where we put it, validate it, yes or no, and then the reference where that came from. If it's an inhibitor, keeps other things from growing, allelopathic. If it's an invasive plant, which would take a lot more explanation, that thing, or a pest host, or it's a vector for certain pathogens, something like that, that would be another mark on here too, that you would do that. And it might have a number of these. Most of the time it's just 1 or 2. Animal toxins or allergens or something like that. Animal toxin would also be humans. So we would consider ourselves in there also as being kind of a concern. Polyculture communities, now these are already made up. And this is after a lot of plants are in. Like when you did polycultures for your design work, you can actually enter these in or make new ones. And so you would put in a polyculture ID or add to this polyculture. You can look it up, or you can make a new one and you can add to it. So this is very helpful. But if you do that, you have to have all the numbers ready for all the plants, because again, just like up here with the compatibles, it wants to know the plant ID number when you're doing these. So you have to first make sure that all your plants are in the database. Then you can go build the polycultures and just list all of it, and it will automatically put those in the database that way. Now there's 2 different things at the bottom here, and I am recording this, by the way, for your benefit, hopefully. Polycultures are things that we make as designers or other people have done. Natural plant associate communities are plants that naturally grow together. And usually in many different environments, ecologies, there are groups of plants that generally are found within the same area, whether it's a wetland area or a forest patch or a certain kind of environment. So there are certain plants that always grow together. And we have hundreds of these on here already, but they need to be naturally occurring, not polycultures. And that's why we have to separate those 2. The natural plant associates are guides for us to use for making our own. So you can find the environment that you're in, or you can find lists of them. And we're always trying to add more to these because it's, again, it's very North American centric where we have found them, but we're always looking for other ones to help people find out what naturally occurs with this plant in nature. And that would be your obvious first choice or first investigation to look at to use. And from that, make polycultures. And then you could actually have the natural plant associate where naturally what occurs, and then the ones that you've built for your own land. Any questions so far? You can ask any time, by the way. Interrupt me. Okay. So this is the big data entry page. How you get organized to get the information on here is up to you. Most people, I shouldn't say most people, the ones that I've heard from, and we've had about 8 or 9 different authors working on this over the years, and 3 or 4 at one time, and sometimes. Kaya, who worked on this extensively for about a year, she just had a spiral notebook that she would keep track, and she would get the name of the plant, go in, or she'd be cutting and pasting information off of websites where she'd find it, and she'd kind of make her own little document for each plant, keep track of that. Then when she had the basic information, come in here and basically fill this out and get all the information on here. So it basically is your work style. If you want to create your own library, especially in Zanzibar or Tanzania, if there's a Tanzania list that you want to work on specifically, having that information on your own, in your own workbook or spiral notebook might be very advantageous to have, because it's easy, and that's why I like printing things out or writing things out, is that it's a lot easier to carry around a spiral tablet than it is a laptop or a tablet, and a pencil is a lot easier to start up too. So this is the data entry area. That's about all that's on here. Just keep in mind that if you want to maintain plants or add new plants, that's this one here. And you can add a new plant if it's not on here. But if you're going to add a plant, you first have to make sure that it's not already in here. So let's just say Amorpha. These are plants that are in the desert area. They're nitrogen fixing plants. False indigo, lead plant, but we also have, here's another bamboo that pops in there. So when you're looking to see if we have plants on here already, you don't actually have to type in the whole name, just a couple letters of it, because if it's misspelled, it's not going to show up. So I just put in the first part of this scientific name on this, the genus Amorpha, and then it shows me all the plants that are on here. You can see there is no exclamation point on here, so it's there. If we don't see it in there, then you know that the plant that you're probably working on isn't in the database yet or not in the list. What you can also do is just put in an exclamation point, and you'll get a list of all the plants that we're actually working on. One of the things you'll see in here, which is coming along fairly nicely, is you see all the little Jackies in here. So that's Jackie in Cape Town. And she's working on South African plants. She actually has started about 300 plants. She hasn't entered them yet, but she's gone through, and so I know which one she's working on, put her name by them. And then you can also see, though, there's a lot of them that don't have Jackie next to it, and these are alphabetical, so she's coming up on here. But there's also a lot more of these on here. There are about 3,000 plants on here, but this will only show you the first 100. Most of them are like this. They just have an exclamation point. We don't know a common name or the sort name. And then here's the scientific name here. So you can put in like Smilex or Smilex if you were looking for that plant, and all of those would show up, and you'd probably see most of them have exclamation points. Here we go. So there's a lot of that plant in here, but none of this genus has actually been entered. I don't even know what this plant is. Panama and Dominguez, that would tell me that's probably Central America. You can tell sometimes with the way people name things that they're localizing it. Pseudo-China. Yeah. So if this is something that you want to work on and you're going to look at. You can see the number here. There's the plant ID. You could actually click on this and open up that plant. And then what I would ask you to do would just do in the sort name, and I'll talk about this a little bit, is just put your name in there. And that'll show me that you're looking it up. And then I can actually search for all of Laura's plants that she's working on eventually. Greenbrier. Okay, that's what that one is. And as long as that exclamation point is in there, we're good to go. So this is just telling me that you're working on it. And that's good to know. It tells other people too, as they're looking at it, that, oh, you've already got information on this. You've already been working on this plant. It just, some things may be missing. Like we might see in here that a lot of this information is filled in, but we didn't have any ecological functions yet. And if we don't have any ecological functions or human uses, we don't put it on the website because that's what people search for. And that's the whole point. So if it doesn't have an ecological function or human use that we have found, it just sits there until we find one. So that's Greenbrier. Oh, right. So when you're on the plant database, let's go back to that. So I'm on the plant database now, and I go to plant list. Or the plant name here, there's two things. The plant name is the common name. And this is how we sort the plants, is by the sort name, and because it's going to be different. You can see here, here's a hazel alder. Well, the sort name, we always have to put it, what is the name really, is alder, gray. That's how we have to sort things, so they go alphabetically. The sort name always has to be with like the group of plants that have a similar name, so you can get them in a group and get them together. So we sort them alphabetically. So any kind of thing that has like yellow pine or purple pine or greasy pine will always be pine, greasy. Otherwise, they get out of order. And that's our biggest problem, of course, with sorting plants, is the common names are so different everywhere you go. But so the sort name is how we sort them, and that's how they appear here alphabetically. As simple as possible. And if there was a exclamation point in front of this, you wouldn't see it on this area. So the plant name in the plant list is actually the sort field that we use for that, which is here. The common name is, like here, Greenbrier. That would be at the top of the plant detail page. So basically it would just say all the different common names. Now, thank you for asking about that, because I wanted to talk more about this field. This field is very important, so the sort name field, because it's not just, like here, the PFAF, by the way, can go away. We really don't need that. But I might leave the exclamation point, put in Greenbrier, but this plant might be called something else in Zanzibar. It might be called something else in Italy, right? It has the same scientific name. So as many sort names as we can put in with a comma, that helps people find the plants if they're looking for a specific plant by common name. So that sort field with the sort name, we can actually put all sorts of things in there as long as it has a comma in between. The common name on top, that's kind of, we don't really sort by that, and you could put all sorts of names in there too. You could actually put them in both if you wanted to. The problem being, of course, is that the sort name is alphabetical by whatever the first word we put in there. In this case, would be Greenbrier, so it's going to be in the G's. And that's why we ask people to search by common name or by scientific name. It's the only thing we can actually count on when we're looking for plants. So common name, whatever you want to put in there, people are calling it Buchu. You know what Buchu is? Bushu. And I'm still trying to figure out what they call it in other areas, because I think that might have other common names. And that would be another example, is we would, again, what is it called in this country? What is it called in that country? Even different languages, perhaps, or Spanish, right? What they might call it in French. We can put that in the sort name, and it makes it easier to find, because you can search all of these fields. You can search by sort name, and you can search by common name, or excuse me, scientific name, and still find the plant, because that is somewhere in there. It'll be buried, so to speak. So let's see here. Go to, you'll see here the common name is gray alder. Here's the scientific name. On this plant detail page, the sort name doesn't show up, right? Because we only use that internally for finding plants. So the common name is we still want to have all the different names up in here that would be helpful for people to use. Scientific name, all the rest of this isn't really going to change, but it does help if the common name has all the different names in it that it might be called. And that will help me too to understand different things about it. But the rest of the information will be fine. Doesn't matter as long as people can actually find the plant that they're looking for. Okay, so on this page here, let's see here, this is where you're going to enter your data. That's when you're comfortable. It's good to kind of practice this a couple times with a couple plants, get used to what you're doing, find out what information you don't have. Keep in mind, on the far right, you can see unknown. We do have a lot of unknowns about tolerances, things like that, whether it's fire tolerant or salt tolerant. There might not be information on that. That's fine. It's great if we can find it, but that does not exclude it from the list. Other things like height and spread and pH, soil pH, we have to know those things. Those are very important. Sun and soil type, soil moisture, very important. Root depth, not so much. Root type, not so much, but obviously it's going to be very helpful. And usually it's fairly easy to find. Is it fibrous deep, fibrous shallow? Does it have tap roots? Those kinds of things. It also might have a couple different kinds of root types in the same plant. So those kinds of things are very important to have, but they don't keep us, if you can't find it, it's okay. We can always go back and get it later. Cold injuries, storm damage, things like that. If it's unknown, it's unknown. If you have an option of saying it's unknown, you have an option of not filling it in. Even on root depth, sometimes we don't know that. But we want to get as much information as possible on all of these in order to make it useful to people and not just throw a bunch of plants in there. But if all we know is that it's full sun, it uses this type of soil, and we know its characteristics, and we have human uses and ecological functions, that's enough to get it going and get it on the list, and then we can go back later and fill it in. But as you're working on finding this information, usually there's a lot. You'll find one spot that's talking about the plant, and they'll give you a lot of the information. So, and I actually, and you can, I just have this page printed out and hanging up so I can kind of remember what information I'm looking for sometimes on these, what the terms are specifically. The pull downs don't really print out, but you can kind of see those and make a list of those. I think those might exist on the printout. I can see if I can send that to you, or you could do it yourself. So that's the data entry page. So we're kind of working backwards. It shows up in here on the Natural Capital Plant database like this. We entered the data on this site. And if you don't have any questions, we'll go on to the next part. Everything good? Okay. All right. And then in Google Sheets, we have the working pages. So this is where most of the sausage is made before we put it out on display. The updated plants that people have put in are listed here. So you can see Kaya's list of plants that she put in over a fair amount of time. And Bryce is in here. And as they added plants to the list, we have 716 in this list. They would put their name and they would check it. So back to the top here. What I actually like people to do now is basically go in and insert 6 rows above. Just bring some empty rows in and put your plants in there so I don't have to scroll to the bottom. So you would put your common name, the scientific name, the plant ID number that was assigned by the plant database, and then you would put a check in there saying that it's ready for review. Then I go look at it and everything's fine. I turn it on. I take the exclamation point out of the name and I make it live, and I put an X here to tell you that it's live. There's also a place for your name so I know who is working on this, and then any comments that you might have. And over time, I don't know if there's a few on here. I might have questions or something about that plant that just reminds us to go look at that. And sometimes if there's something missing, I'll make a comment of what's needed. So as you finish a plant and you've put it in the database, then just basically cut and paste the names in here or write them in, ID number, put a check in there, your name, and now I know that it's ready to go. This is about the only thing that I check on here. So you can see on here is Kaya's list, and last time she was working on this, she was doing groups of plants. These are actually natural plant associate groups that we found. Mojave Desert, clay bottom plants generally go together. Mojave Desert, sandy loam plants that go together. So you can see how she sees existing ones for this group and ones that she needs to put in. So this is sometimes how we work also, is I'll find a nice list of plants for a certain area. Say there might be some kind of bamboo polyculture or a ravine group of plants that grows in certain areas of Africa or South America or something like that. There'll be great documentation. We'll basically just cut and paste those groups in here, and then we'll go see. Then we do the work. Then we'll go find and see what ones we have, so we can start putting them in their groups for people. It helps us also kind of fill out some of these things that are missing for us. But this is also how we make polycultures, or the natural plant associates, is to go find these and find what those numbers are and make them as natural plant associate groups in there. So that's something that Kaya was working on. Right now you can see, here we go, Jackie's list. So here's what Jackie has done, and she's pasted these in. She's done a lot of work on this side. She hasn't done anything in entering plants yet, but she's putting in the yellow and the green ones are things that I've made notes to her about. Things that are beyond here. You can see the little notes. But she's gone and found the plant name. She already had this list of common name and scientific names, and she basically found these lists and put those in the spreadsheet. I don't really know how she did it. Doesn't really matter. She probably cut and pasted it from somewhere, or she typed them in. And so this is the list of plants that Jackie is doing. So you can kind of see there's a lot of plants on here. I hope she gets started with it. And the sort name, like as you can see here, is exclamation point Jackie. That's the actual thing. That's the sort name that's on that website page that we looked at. So in the data entry page here, I can go into sort name and I can type Jackie, and now all of the plants that she's working on are going to show up here, and I can see. And they all should have exclamation points by them. So the same thing is true here in the sort name. Scientific name. Now, this is a very extensive spreadsheet, which you can kind of see. This and all, there's one I can make for you also. It's just helping her, and she basically is kind of printing this out to help her stay organized. But all of the fields are in this spreadsheet, much like we want to find out about plants, the things that we want to know. So it's pretty long, as you can see. It just goes on and on and on because there's a lot of variations and things we're looking for. So how helpful it is up to whoever's using it. Sometimes, like I say, you go find a group of plants, you're going to go find all the aloe plants or all the asparagus, like you can see she's doing a lot of those. She's going to go find those and then put this in. And that's fine. So, because it's much easier to work on a group of plants like asparagus and all these different asparagus, because they should be fairly similar, and there will be some differentiation by size or human use, or maybe some of them aren't edible, I would have to assume. Not all of them are. So, but then you can also see down here, like in line 30, where it has these different names, right? So there's a lot of names going on in there. Berg apple tige, so I don't even know what that is. Maybe you know what those, Africana maybe? Oh, okay. So that again is where in this field, the sort field or common name, we would call that mountain apple, if that is also what it's called somewhere, as long as it's the same scientific name. So this is her list, what she's working on. She's put a huge amount of time just into building this list, which is fine. and I'm hoping that she gets on to start adding them. If you find a plant that has no information, it doesn't really matter if somebody else has their name behind it. We need to get the plants filled in. We just want to coordinate so that we're not doubling up on these. And also, if there are plants that you want to put in that are already listed, that's fine. We can just start putting those in. Online resources. Oh, go ahead. Yeah. Oh, okay. So there's a lot of different ones of those. Okay. Right. Well, if it's a different scientific name, uh, that would be helpful. The other thing I'm actually wondering about as we do this more internationally, we don't have a way to separate things regionally. It's just too much of a mess because there's plants all over the world now that, we can't say it's, I mean, it's in South Africa, doesn't mean it's not in Canada, or, and you can't just go list all these countries and people say, well, it's in ours too. And it's like, just be a mess. So what I'm asking people to do is put in the different names, like the one Mountain Apple or the one that you have, and somewhere in the note box, which I should show you, I'll go back to that page in one of these. So this is a bitter aloe. In the note box, which you see right here, this note box can be really big. You just make it bigger. So any information about this that you want to put in goes in the note box. Frequently found in South Africa or Zanzibar, native to Madagascar, blah, 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 blah. So you can write a narrative, pretty much anything you want in that note box, because that's where we just dump everything that we don't have a place for in this. So this is, I'm just going to show you how she's done this, and going forward, the plant types, which are, let's see if I can get over here. And as far as getting organized, the only really on here that we expect is the information we need is obviously scientific name, family of the plant, plant type, and she has herb on here, but basically we have perennial. Everything's either a grass or a perennial or a shrub or a tree or a vine. We don't differentiate in here. So succulent shrub would not be important to us, but if it's evergreen or deciduous shrub, that's important to us. And if it's a tree, we need to know whether it's deciduous or an evergreen tree. Yeah, same thing with the shrub. Aquatic plants is a version, but it's just aquatic. And read like, that's going to be based on the common name or the scientific name. So this is important here to fill it in, because you'll only have so many choices when you go to put that on the website there. Height and spread, of course, and size, those things. Sometimes you can't find the spread or the width of the plant, but we do need to have it on there. It's one of those things we can't, because we're making symbols and stuff. We need to know how big it is. So wherever you can find that. So the rest of this information, as you can see, it associates with the database. Now, we don't want to leave you out in the cold for all this, so we have lots of places to look. A lot of different areas, wildflowers, tolerances, specialized information on plants, general information on plants. And these are worth looking at, even just checking out casually, just clicking through all these web links and seeing what kind of information they have. It's very, very useful. So these are online resources here. Other useful ones, we just have one line. This is also a number of areas to go and look for plant information. The only other thing we do is Google it, right? We Google a lot. We use Wikipedia a lot to find information on plants, especially when it comes to growing zone or height and width. And then we start hitting the other specific websites if we don't know what that is. This is a detailed listing, and this is what like say right now, I'm going to duplicate that. Okay. And I'm going to make that yours. So this is now your empty page to put things on as you're working. However you'd like, you can reorder it. You can redo whatever you want to this to make it easier for you. We just need to, this is the information we're always looking for with the plants. This is the easiest place too. If you find a list on the internet, to cut it and paste it either into your own Excel spreadsheet or onto here, makes it at least some place to go look for stuff, to keep organized for that. And then once you have a plant done, then it's just a matter of copying ID, common name, sort name, and then coming back here and putting it in there. I should actually reorder these so that you can cut and paste those more easily. So by the way, that should be like that, and that should be like that. Here we go. So I know the ones that you put in. Many times, if you want to, you have like your LoRa list here. You can also just add more columns on the left and have a little check field or something that you're working on, and I can check there too to see what you're doing. So that's kind of the lay of the land now for how we're working. We have the plant database, which you have access to, and if all of a sudden you don't, or that other one runs out, or somebody changes the name, I'll give you your own access to get on there. The database entry, I'll send you the page that has the access for that to put the information in. And we'll look into polycultures and things at another time. And it's pretty straightforward when you're doing polycultures. Give it a name, give it a type, and you have to create one first, and then you go back in and you add all the plant numbers. So this is where you have to have the plant ID number to make the polyculture. So you have to make sure all your plants are in there first, and it goes very quickly to make. So that's how this is working. Did you have any other questions? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of it may be, there might be plants that you already know. So it might just be you going in and finding a plant and just putting in as much information about that one that you know and playing with that and then hitting the different groups of plants. Like Bryce had put in all the pine trees. He just went through all the books he had and found a lot of great information. And he just did one, basically genus of tree and did all of them he could find all around the world, which is really great. That's one way of doing it. Or if you have a certain group of plants that you've been working with and know a lot about, work on those. So part of it is the more efficient you are, obviously, the better and the more plants get in there. They get in faster. And also, do you have a logo or you do have something for your site, or what organization are you going under? Oh, okay. All right. And that's the one that we used with, let's see here, with Franco. That's okay. All right. Okay. Is that only in Zanzibar? Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. So what I want to do, I tell Paula all the time, is as we're working on these things, especially when it's about about natural capital is we have our contributors, people that have worked on it, and we always want to give people credit for that. But I also told her right on the front page when people come onto our website, I want to start listing all the different organizations that we're working with also. So you can see here is on the front page we have Practical Permaculture, we have the Hope Foundation and United Designers with Franco's work. But more and more across the top, I want to list all these different organizations that we're working with, and so that's good. Now I know that. Okay, so what I'll do next then is send you the documentation, which is the sheet that'll have your access and the web links to data entry. Also share that Google sheet with you so you can add plants to that. And do you have any specific area? Are you going to work with Zanzibar or certain types of plants, or what do you think you want to focus on first? Oh, I see. Okay. I would say, well, as far as tropical plants go, they have a range. So, and we do the growing zones by their range, and it might be 9 to 13, it might be 9 to 12. That's the thing with those, is some of them are very uh, sensitive to temperature, put it that way. So some of them might not go that high, and other ones can't go very low. So they probably have a range, and that's how we would list it in there. Um, but that's great. So that would be the first step, would be to go on the spreadsheet in the Google Doc and just list all the plants that you didn't find on the database, and then go into the maintenance page on the data entry site and look and see if it's even listed. If it is listed, now you have a number and you can work on that one. And then once I see which ones you're working on, I can also send you other information I might have for those plants too. So that's good to know. Well, great. Well, this has been wonderful.